Recording in progress.
Awesome! We're live. We're not live. I tend to say that sometimes. Hannah, thanks for being here. We got Hannah Boone of the Disordered Podcast coming on. Is there other... I should give other plugs than that, right? I mean, how do you characterize yourself, title and career-wise?
I'm a stand-up comedian and writer, but at the moment there's no really stand-up comedy going on, so there's not really a lot to promote. Yeah, I mean, I guess like I've been publishing different things, but it's all in different publications, so I'm not even sure how to promote that.
Okay, cool. But and I saw your tweet that the podcast is coming back with new episodes in March, right?
Yeah, very soon, because I'm moving. I'm like in the process of moving. I should be all moved in by March. I want it to be on Mondays. So the first Monday in March is March 7th, but I might start sending things out by then. But it was like, it's been a whole thing trying to get equipment together and stuff. So
yeah, it is. Yeah, trying to get anything. And actually I would commend, we'll probably talk a little bit about this with the topic, but I would commend the foresight, I guess, of saying, hey, here comes our here comes our new episodes in March. Whereas I'm always the type to be like, let's do it. What are we doing now? Okay, it's coming out next week. And then I'm like, oh, wait, no, I just lied sort of inadvertently and told everyone something's coming out when it won't be, months.
And I've done that so many times that this is the first time in my life where I'm finally like, let's be realistic. You have a million things going on in your personal life. It's gonna take a little bit and also it gives like new listeners a chance to catch up on all the old episodes and figure out what we're about,
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a cool thing. And here we are at the first of the year-ish. We're in the early days of January 2022. I'm throwing an extra 20 in there to make it more meaningful. So it's a perfect time for us to get into this because this is where people talk about different things, about resolutions and goals for the upcoming year and what they want to do. And when you had appeared on, we had a big sort of panel discussion about gratitude around U.S. Thanksgiving time, in November. And I was really intrigued. You started to say some things that I really key into personally about productivity and our societal, I will say, obsessive nature, our obsessive relationship with productivity that's out there. Now, this does not, I'm going to put this out there. I don't know that this crosses all cultures. I have not lived in all cultures. That guest is coming. I haven't found the guest yet who's lived in all cultures. So I guess a lot of what I'm speaking is USA centric, but I think you can see a trend, a lot of different first world places at least, or anyway, there's just different ways that we engage with that. But and so being productive and the pressures to be productive. Where should we start with that? There's so much we could say about it. It's kind of a soapbox issue for me.
Well, I mean, I have something personal coming from today that kind of ties in a little bit, but it's like I had a tweet go viral and I like try to keep up my Twitter. And so that's like, I consider that not productive exactly, but like it's toward like like keeping, the podcast under the spotlight and everything. And the tweet went viral and I thought it was really good. And then I usually don't read comments, but I accidentally clicked the notification button instead of like my profile. Like I just wasn't thinking. And I had to block so many people, like the insanity of just like people like just being like, you're ugly, you should be dead. Like I tweeted about like, I literally tweeted like about one time a guy dumped me and he told me to have a hot girl summer. And I thought that was silly. And people are just like, I'm glad he dumped you. You're an idiot. Like, just like, and I was just like, and so I feel like things that being productive or getting something you want doesn't always end up being the great thing anyway.
Yeah.
So that's just, I'm just trying to squeeze in my trauma into this episode. But
well, it's an interesting thing because there's a pressure and a lot of it comes around definition and expectations. Like when we say a word, especially emotionally laden words, some words are kind of like landmines of definitions, right? So like what is productive? And you're absolutely right. Like, especially for someone in entertainment, Like that's big, right? Is to have a presence, social media. Everybody, it
Right.
ties in a lot of different careers now. And I know that
Right.
expectation of being like I've dabbled in, and sometimes I'll come up with a cool little card with a little sound bar, kind of a promotion for the podcast. And I will say many times, you could easily say the bulk and majority of times I have not. And it's not because I really only liked those 3 episodes. It's more because I just didn't do it, or whatever. And so then it's like instead of saying, "Oh wow, cool, I got that out there," and 15 people looked at it, yay. Instead of that celebration, right? There's a feeling of like, "Geez, why don't I do this more? I'm supposed to be a podcaster and don't even do
Oh,
this."
it's never enough. Like that's the thing with the productivity thing too. It's a hamster wheel. Like there's never like I never get to a point like if I do get to a point where I'm satisfied, it's so fleeting and then I need the next thing. Like it's such an addiction. It's such a like I'm like a hungry ghost. Like I'm just like, well, but I could do more, but I could do this more. And it's like there's no and I feel like there because there's a shame and I feel it. So I know other people feel it. There's like this shame of like if I rest, if I take a break, if I am like, okay, I can do half of what I thought I could do today, there's like and so like there's shame. So like my productivity is not because I want to be productive, it's because I'm avoiding the shame. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
fear based, not like love of the game based, you know?
Is well, right? There's that old question of like, what is happiness the absence of sadness, right? Or is pride the absence of shame, or is it actually a positive thing, a positive feeling, kind of thing?
Mhm.
What One of the things that strikes me is when we look at something being productive or not productive, is do we allow ourselves to personalize that definition? Right? Do we allow ourselves to say what is the goal that I really have? Or, I don't know, we can get into even goals in general of how that works. I think that might even be scaling back and saying we assume that we know what that means when we say we have goals, right?
Mhm.
People say that, and I think we get a certain idea. I know for me, when I hear somebody say that, like a New Year's resolution or setting a goal or being productive today, in my mind, it's this thing that looks externally like regimented, or we get up and it's like, um, I have a to-do list and I do all of it, and I have a schedule, and I've got, maybe I have alarms, maybe I don't, whatever. But ultimately, really, no. Ideally, it's all in my head, and I know what I'm doing. I'm like, the example that came into my mind is one I'm going to hesitate to say, but if anybody out there, they can shame me for this. However, Captain Von Trapp was the example that came to my mind from Sound of Music. There's a cut for you, you know. And the interesting thing is it's pre reformation when Julie Andrews, I think is the character's name, comes in and is nanny to the kids, and teaches them the joy of making clothing out of curtains, and being a little more mischievous and a little more like outside the box. And he's just like, no, I want to blow a whistle and have my children make their bed.
Right.
Um,
Right though.
and yet in my mind there's this ideal that I measure myself against, that's this like bad this bad pre healing kind of thing, right?
Right. Well, absolutely. And I mean, that's what I think it comes from too, is like the constant, well, I think there's a few things to it. Like you're talking about, like, I think that it is an internal thing, right? Like we do have the like militant, like blow the whistle person inside of us. And then we also have the Julie Andrews who's like, life can be fun. And I think it's like kind of a battle between them. But I do think it is also societal, and we grow up, like I mean, oh my God, it's actually funny you brought that up because the movie Singing in the Rain,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or this like that scene where he sings Singing in the Rain or whatever, and he's like dancing in the rain. He like I remember watching that movie when I was little, and my grandpa being like, when they filmed this, he had 103-degree fever, and he still went to work and did it. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like we idolize like working until you're sick, like
Yeah.
just like we really do. We idolize it and we think it's amazing and a superpower. And I'd be lying if I said I don't feel that way naturally too. Like I have to talk myself down from that because I feel that too. I'm like, wow, people doing things even though it's making them miserable. Cool.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting idea to think of this like kind of superpowered. There, how many of us grew up with some kind of passed down shame around being tired or taking a day off or something like that? I mean, they still talk about it when they'll say, "Oh, so and so, worked here for this many years and never took a sick day," and it's like, well, they probably should have taken a sick day,
Yeah.
right?
Right. We give awards for like attendance, even in school, which is really your parents' attendance, not yours when you're in third grade. But like, like even it's bred in so early. And like, I'm trying to unlearn that right now. Like, my whole life doesn't have to be a vacation. I should work, but like, it's important to slow down and take a moment. Because when I slow down, like, the reason I didn't rush back into the podcast is because there's a lot of reasons, because of like logistical things. I'm moving and equipment and like being able to afford new equipment and like all this stuff. But there was also the factor of like, I'm not ready to be consistent yet. And like, I need my life to be more in order. And I don't want to just like put out a half-assed episode every 2 months for a while. Like, I want to be able to do this. And like, that creates better work for me, when I'm not like worn out and just trying to squeeze out juice that isn't there,
Right. And, that gets into something that I think about a lot, which is tangible productivity. And I hate to even say intangible, because what you just mentioned is tangible. You could measure it if you wanted to.
Mhm.
So therefore it is, but we think of it as this intangible benefit of, oh, if you take time off, it's somehow good for you. We've kind of come to a point where we can admit that. We still give the awards for, punishing yourself, but we've admitted that it's healthy when you take breaks, and a workforce that takes breaks produces more. And we know that's true. We kind of don't really accept it, but at the same time, we've gotten to a point where we'll give it lip service, right? And
Mhm.
I will say there's some companies out there that are like, oh, if you have a little more medical leave, or you have a little more flexibility in your schedule, or you can work remotely, sometimes people do better. So that's there. Um, but we think of that as an intangible benefit. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, when we look at it and say, if we're busting it out 24/7, we're really doing worse a lot of times. So at that point, it's a value that we are putting into it. We are saying somehow it's worth it morally, or something is worth it more to work harder, get less done in the long run. So we pretend that we're getting more done. And if I pretend I'm getting more done hard enough, I should feel good about myself. Whereas if I'm taking the breaks and being that healthy, and actually maybe even producing in a way more or quality stuff that are actually better ideas, then I should feel bad about myself, kind of.
Right. Right. No, totally though. Like, we're being a human is seen. I had a friend who used to joke about this with me, but like, I would joke that they hated being a human, because it's like, we do like anything that's human of us. We're like, ugh, that's awful. Like, we're expected to be machines. And it's just like, it's funny. I read this quote once that I loved, that was like, quote, tweet. But someone tweeted, they were like, something like, stop talking about having a dream job. I don't dream of working. And it's just like, I really liked that, where it's like, yeah, like, we're taught that this is like our hopes and dreams is like what we do to earn money. And that's not necessarily, those don't, I mean, those don't necessarily go hand in hand, and they don't have to. But yeah, I think that we like are expected to be machines, not just by ourselves, but by like the higher ups, by the people who benefit from us working 24/7, by like, and like, if we need rest, or if we need God forbid, a mental health day, which like doesn't exist, like,
Right.
you
We'd
know.
like to say it, right? We'd like to say things like that. But at the same time, when the push comes to shove, we don't really allow it, so to speak, even if it's allowed by policy. And changing a culture is very, very hard. When you try to change a culture to say we accept the mental health and emotional health needs. I mean, realistically, psychological needs are medical needs, and there's no reason to differentiate, right? To
Right.
say, am I taking a sick day or a mental health day, right? I mean, even the fact that we talk about it that way shows that we value it less somehow, right?
Right.
It's like, oh,
Right.
I'm taking a sick day because I'm actually sick. A mental health day is because I'm a wimp.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. When I was a little kid and I wanted to skip school, like if I didn't feel good or what for whatever reason, my dad would literally just be like, if you're not vomiting with a fever, you're going to school. Like that was and it's just like, okay. But no one ever talked about when you're just like, when you've been sad for a week and it's like things are off and like no one cares. There is no like, hey, I'm going through a divorce. I can't make it into work today because I'm so sad. There is no, that doesn't, you can't call your boss and say that.
Yeah.
Or in most jobs, maybe
In
some
most
you can.
jobs. I'll put it out there too. I'd love to hear from anybody out there who has experience with this. We're always open to. I love to hear back from people. What they think. Tweet at Break a Brain. Tweet at me is always better than putting in the reviews. Sometimes that happens on podcasts. Oh, I thought this about this episode. My job's great. 1 star. No, I'm just kidding. But I don't do that to my employees. 1 star. But I think you see more of that trend. I mean, some people, I follow Dan Price on Twitter. I don't know, those of whoever knows who he is. He's kind of became known a while back for changing his company structure. He's a CEO and he owns his company, and he changed it so that everybody makes at least 70 grand in his company. And to do that, he cut his own salary to 70 grand a year.
That's great.
Yeah. And he tweets a lot about, what is like health for workers versus health for a company, right? To say, of course, we don't want you to, of course, you're expected to have all this experience and work for very little money because it's good for the company. It's like, but it's not really good for the company, is his position. He's always tweeting about how his company's done much better since he made that change. And the reason he made the change was he talked with somebody once and she mentioned something about her part-time job. And he said he had this knee-jerk reaction of like, why do you have a part-time job? You're full-time here. It was a person in some kind of role that he'd expect that this was a career job, right?
Right.
And she's like, almost laughed at him, like, I can't afford to live on what I get. I'm paid here, and it bothered him so much that somebody who worked for him in a company that he had created would have to, do that, work beyond their full-time hours for someone else in order to make a living. That ultimately that interaction is what he credits with leading to that. So, so there are examples of that out there where people are kind of redefining that. And it's interesting because, as you put it, what was the phrase you used a little while ago, like the love of the game.
Yeah.
So I think some of this boils down to what people assume about humans. Do we assume that people are lazy? And if we reward them with basic life needs, if we reward people with being the opportunity to be healthy, if we allow that, and that's just kind of like they're going to just be lazy and do nothing? Or do we think that people are actually passionate and engaged and intelligent, and deep down people will tend to say, if my life is good, I want to do good things. I want to work. I want to be productive and healthy, and all of those things are there. And most people are going to try to do that, especially if their basic needs are met.
That's so interesting. Yeah. It's like trust almost. It's like, do we trust people to keep, like, if they have a little bit more free will to keep doing what they're doing? And I think so. I mean, even in the jobs, I worked so many retail food service like jobs that like I really didn't like, but I'm realizing like if I worked 4 days a week instead of 6, like I liked it a lot more. Like it wasn't so hellacious. Like it was like fine. And those are mostly the jobs I've worked. And I've noticed like on holiday weekends and stuff, it's like just that extra day of rest. Like I'm so much better at work. But that is really interesting. It's like if we don't, it's like we have to force people to do the right thing. And it's like, do you? Like I like that of like maybe because it's like I do want to have. It's funny, I'm not working right now. I had to quit my job. I'm just not working for a month and then I'm starting a new job. But it's so funny because like it sounded like the dream of like, oh, I have all this time off. Cool. But it's like, I miss having a routine and I miss feeling like I have a purpose with like work. And like I'm excited to start working again. And like really I am. And so, like we do have that in us
Mhm.
naturally, I think.
When I worked for a community mental health agency years ago, we worked with a population of clients. A lot of times were on Medicaid or on welfare and couldn't work. A certain segment of the population, and then we had some other areas we worked in, like court ordered treatment and things like that. But a lot of people who were had forced time off, and some who couldn't work for long term at a job. And I found that that's actually the norm. That most people, when confronted with that, is saying like, right now I don't have the option. It's not I'm not taking a week off for vacation.
Hmm.
And there's that weird balance of like, when we're too busy, we crave some time off, and when we have nothing but time off, we crave being busy. So obviously, a balance is the healthiest.
Right.
But it really opened my eyes to where a lot of people will talk about, especially people benefiting from government programs. And if I have a bias, it definitely leans towards those that are on those programs, because I found them to be quite motivated, hard workers, that there were health reasons, obviously, oftentimes. And they had to jump through so many hoops to qualify and establish that they had the health problems enough to be considered legally disabled. It's not easy,
Yeah.
by the way. It's hard work to maintain those benefits.
It's hard work to get them. It's hard work to maintain them. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely. My dad's on disability and it's like he's about to lose it all the time.
Exactly. No, it's true. I mean, how many times I've had to write like letters and things for my little part of therapy and stuff. And it's like amazing frequency when you work with someone long enough or know them long enough that it's like, didn't you just get audited like a what? Yeah, I got to do this every couple of years, and go around to
Mhm.
every medical professional. And I know this firsthand from my own lack of organization. I know that they had to remind me a couple times, and that's not a great feeling to be like I had to call my doctor 16 times to get them to
Yeah.
write a paragraph, right? Because they were, they didn't have that scheduled in or whatever. Um, and so, and it's not just, I mean, obviously, there's just a lot of things that they have to do to keep those benefits at all. So they're hard workers in one way, as in one
Hmm.
very real way. But all of them are also looking for purpose. I find that was majority of case. I don't know. I think that a lot of times we try to plan our motivational strategies as a society or just as people. We try to plan it based off of a very small minority of people. Somebody out there who's like, I'm going to game the system and I'm going to try to get something for nothing. And we worry so much about someone getting away with that we have to pressure everybody as if we all should feel like we're on trial just for having a need, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like there's kind there, I feel like there's no dignity in it. Like we make sure there's no dignity. Like there can be and there should be, but I feel like we make sure to kind of punish people in a weird way for
Yeah.
needing time off or like, not being able to work. Like if you're like it's everywhere. It's like if this person doesn't have a job, then I'm going to make the following assumptions, and it's like, but we don't know what's going on,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, there's a book that's out there. It's kind of like a pivotal work on the psychology of masculinity.
Hmm.
And it's funny, it was actually written back in the 90s, back before like toxic masculinity was a term that was thrown around. It's a guy named
Hmm.
Frank Pittman, the book called Man Enough. And the interesting thing was he actually coined his own term that never really caught on because it's hard to say, but he called them masculopathic behaviors, which was a smash up of the word masculine and the word pathology, obviously. And so that one, I've never heard anyone else ever use it outside that book. But the interesting thing, it was all about like from a male psychological perspective, but he talked a lot about this pressure to perform or this pressure or whatever. And he told a story of himself. He's an MD and did psychiatric treatment and was was a psychiatrist in private practice. And so he talked about his profession being traditionally one in which it's like you go to medical school, you're busting your ass forever and you're up at all hours and you never sleep and you never see your family and whatever. And after he got through a lot of his schooling, he said he worked, he had some kids and So he spent a lot of time at home with his wife and kids, and he worked as little as possible. And so they didn't make very much money. And so he talked about that as saying, like, I was taught socially and openly in some cases, people saying things like, you're wasting the opportunity, you're wasting your time. And for him, he was like, my value was at something else for a while. He's like, since then, as I got older, I've expanded my practice and I wrote some books and things, and they took a lot of time to do that up. And he's like, but that's what I'm doing now. That's not any better than what I was doing then, which was go grind out a few hours, help a few people, come home. And it's like, so where's that choice of being like, can we choose to be, even the fact that we say less productive, right? We have to say less productive because you're not making as much money, or because you're not building as many widgets in a factory or whatever. That's my understanding of workplace. Outside of human services, I don't know how jobs work. Apparently.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I have to tell you, like, when I first got out of rehab, I took a job that was only 4 hours a day, and it was perfect. I needed that. I needed to have a schedule and make some money. And I was making the bare minimum of what I could make, to survive, but I was making it. And like, I still felt ashamed of it. Like, people would talk about, like, oh, I worked 9 hours today. And I'd be like, jealous in this weird way. Like, I'd feel like
I should have done that today or something, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I'm lazy. And I was exhausted. Like, my job was intense. So I was exhausted after 4 hours, but like, I still was like, I should be more exhausted. This is, and it's like, I just got out of the hospital, like, calm down. And even if I hadn't, if that was my job forever to work 4 hours a day, fine. But there was something in my mind that was like, I should be doing that. And yeah, I could only imagine, like, with the, whole gender roles thing, like the masculinity thing of like, I need to be, like, I don't know. That's how it was, right? Like, you never saw dad because he was out working or whatever. And
you expect that, right? You're
right.
supposed to expect that, right?
Right.
Yeah. And that expectation affects how people look at things, right? Of saying, like, is there a good and a bad? We put so much emphasis on what types of choices are acceptable or not acceptable, right? I feel like there has been part of the collective trauma of this whole, like, lockdown pandemic and all of the things that we've been through. We don't talk a lot about the shame that people feel of just not doing anything. I mean, right? Of being like, when it's in a forced situation like this, I kind of feel like everybody felt a little of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I felt it tremendously. And then I got really comfy in it. And then it got taken away, is such a bad way to put it. I was happy that things got lifted.
Because everything's great now with as we're recording in January of 20.
Right. Now that it's all gone and over.
Right. Now everyone's
but like, I did feel like when unemployment went away and when work came back and all that, I was like, I think a lot of people took a step back and they were like, I mean, it's what I've noticed on social media. It's what I've noticed with people I know is like, we've been talking about it and we're like, yeah, like, what was I doing? I was working for a while. I was working an 8-hour a day job, then going to do stand up all night, sleeping 4 hours and doing the whole thing again. No time for exercise or socialization or anything, like eating right, like nothing, like. And then I had to step back and be like, okay, like, I don't know if that's right. Like, I don't know if that's what I'm supposed to do. Like, after this, having the fact that it was such a traumatic, horrible event, this pandemic has been felt also, I think a lot of people also felt a mix of like relief somehow in there. Like, just like not from the pandemic, but from getting to be like, oh, wow, all I have to do right now is survive. And that's it. Like, there was something about that. And I think it changed a lot of our mentality of like, oh, surviving is enough sometimes. Oh,
There's a really weird thing of like mixed emotions that we can feel. We can feel lots of different emotions at the same time, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And it's complicated because it's complicated to feel. And I think it is hard to talk about. You hear people talk about it, and talk about it on social media or with each other or whatever. But we're not having, I just wish we are having more of a conversation on a bigger scale to say, how's everybody doing? You good? I mean, basically that's what it boils down to, and saying
Mhm.
like you're saying, what parts of it actually were good? Did I let go of some things that we saw very much how all of a sudden our reality can change in a day, in a week, in a month, and all of a sudden you've got, I mean, the government just said, hey, okay, trillions of dollars, we're going to spend it now. Okay, well, we did that, or companies would say, we work remotely now. Oh, I've been
Mhm.
asking for that for this many years. Yeah, I know, but we couldn't possibly do it. And now tomorrow we're going to start. Right.
Mhm.
And there were certainly consequences to some of that. Like you see it was hard with schools and some less effective and more effective ways to try to learn at home for kids. And anyway, it wasn't all, that's not all good. But at the same time, it's like, even just the process of saying, how do I do things? Do I have to do them the way I've been doing them? That's
Right.
good. And I feel like that's a lesson that I fear we are losing track. We're losing the thread of that, to say, all right, well, let's just get back to everything the way it was as soon as we possibly can and just do it now, right now,
Right.
right now.
Like, how could we possibly go back to the way things were? How is that like for so many reasons? Like this huge, insane event is happening. This almost apocalyptic like event is going on. And we're like, you know what? Let's just get back to the way it was. And it's like, well, the way it was is gone. Like it has to be
Yeah.
gone. Like you can't like we can't all experience this. And also I feel like you said, the collective trauma is like we're not really paying attention to that. We're kind of doing that thing where we're grazing over it and being like, get back to work. And it's like, uh, this is like a really big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And so part of it does come down to that idea of what, I don't know, what are we looking at? I know that for a long time that schools have faced this, and I know companies too, difference being, is it grades or is it money? But saying like, our test scores should be going up, and money and profit should be going up. And the expectation is every quarter, every year, everything. It almost seems like in some cases the expectation is it should be going up and just forever. And it's like there's a natural ceiling. That's just the way psychology and math work, right? Is like there's a certain ceiling on how much we learn at how young of an age. There's a certain ceiling on how much we can physically and mentally be doing with our time. We can't actually work 24/7 as a human.
Right.
Yet there is a, like, other than physiological sleep that we have to sort of allow for, although we kind of still shame it.
Mm-hmm.
We technically have the capacity to work all the time because of technology. So therefore, right, we think we can. We try to outthink our own physiological limitations,
Right.
and so
Right.
have,
And,
yeah,
yeah. And I was just saying, and they make
yeah,
drugs for that, and they make drinks for that, and they make like all kinds of things for that. And this is reminding me of you talking about working 24/7. Is my mom worked in finance for a long time, so she sees everything as spending, and she's like, you can spend money or time, and that's your choice. You can spend money or your time. I need money to survive, but once I have enough money to survive, time becomes more valuable to me. And I'd rather have the time, I'd rather be rich in time and like, surviving with money than vice versa. I
right.
think I've never been rich, but that's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah. It's easy to say it sucks to be rich if we're not on the list. Trying to look at the other side of goals is commonly something we forget. So, for example, we set our goal around usually what we want to gain, and sometimes what we want to lose. If it's, like weight or something. But, a common one is gaining more money. I want to earn more money. But we don't think about the flip side of the goal, which is there limitations over, like, what do I not want to have happen if this goal happens? And money's a great example because it's like, well, I'll work that extra job. And it's like, okay, but, is there anything that I want to avoid with pursuing this goal? Well, I still want to, maintain time maybe with my family, right?
Mhm.
Or time for other pursuits, or maybe I don't want to impair my health, And if I don't think about those things and I only focus on the goal of more money is math. It's hours to income or whatever it is, that I can make per hour, or starting a business or whatever it is. There's a certain amount of like quantifiable math to say I got to put more hours in. But if it's like, well, I need more money, but right, I've always thought of there's an example of as a young he's probably not young anymore because it was a long time ago, but I assume he's aged since then. But anyway, he was a therapist intern that worked in the same setting I referred to earlier, this community mental health clinic I worked at. And he had been there all the way through graduate school as an intern, and he just got a job thereafter. And great guy. But he, like most of us that were working there, we worked part-time jobs other places because it didn't pay very well, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us had been there getting our hours for licensure, whatever, different reasons. And obviously there's the love of the game. They're trying to help people, that's always part of it. It's one of the reasons you could take advantage of people in nonprofits and social services so much and not pay them is because they want to help people.
Yep. Yep. Well, I mean, anyone in the mental health field, it's like, yeah, we're not doing it to get rich.
Right.
So,
he was working there, and at some point, he was just, I was talking to him, and he said that he knew he was going to work there for a certain number of years. He had a career path, whatever. And he said, most likely I'm going to be here for a few years. And he was working these part-time hours and things. And he said, he and his wife actually had plans to buy a house. And so he was getting all these extra hours and things. And at the same time, they had just had their first child, right? Mm-hmm. And he mentioned one time, he's like, yeah, I quit my part-time job. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Well, how come? Did you hit some goal? Did you, whatever? And he's like, yeah, we hadn't hit our financial goals. We decided to say, screw it. We're not going to buy a house for a while because otherwise we never see each other. And I don't get to see my kid for how many years? That's not going to work. So they scaled their lifestyle back to allow for, and so when you put it that way and say, there's a certain amount of value of that time, right? And so cutting back on things is a way to earn more money. Now, it's not to say that that's possible for everyone. Because, do people need to do what they need to do for to live?
Right.
But I've always thought about that because that was just an alternate solution to the problem of being like, oh, maybe the problem of we need to purchase real estate now. Maybe we made up that problem.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Or maybe it was said to us and we believed it, or,
exactly.
Because why wouldn't you believe it? Yeah. Right. It's like another, we tell people that's a marker of being an adult is buying a house. And it's like, I have no reason to buy a house. I'm 31. I don't need to buy a house. And then also I that reminded me of, I wanted to touch on, there's, I think there's the internal thing too of self-worth when it comes to being productive. It has nothing to do with the money sometimes. And I'm trying to get to a point where I just say I'm enough, the way I am, where I'm at, I'm successful, I'm enough. And it's amazing how much I don't believe that. I say it, so I start to believe it, hopefully, but I cannot comprehend the idea on days where it's Sunday and I'm not working and whatever, and I just stay in bed. I'm like, I'm not enough like this. But it's you are, but it's really hard. I hope I get to a point one day where I'm yeah, I'm enough, but I do not believe it right now. No way. It's crazy.
What have you found, and what do you recommend for working with people? You and I have some things in common with this that we've talked about, with working through mood disorders. I mean, I have bipolar disorder, so I have to watch. My expectations will flux with hypomania or depression, mm-hmm. right? What have you found working with those things to try to do stuff and also not self-punish too much?
I have needed a lot of external help. So going to group therapy, doing DBT, being in recovery really helps because the number one goal I can accomplish every day is to take my meds and stay clean. And those are really, it sounds like nothing, but those are because without those, everything else is gone. Those are my foundation. So I'm learning through therapy and things like that to be really proud of myself and consider myself productive if I've taken my meds and if I have stayed clean and maybe gone to a meeting and talked to my therapist. Those are that. I'm just trying to the way to not be self-punishing and stuff is to really just change my idea of what productive is and what success is, you know?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Have kind of control over that definition kind of thing.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Like I used to just, oh God, my fantasy of being the famous artist who's suffering, you know, like the suffering artist was so big, and that was so important to me. Like I wanted to be all fucked up mentally, but like really like a tortured artist. Like that's what I wanted because it was so glamorized. And then as I became like sicker and sicker, I was like, wait, this is really awful. Like, I don't want that. I don't want, and not only that, but I can't accomplish any goals like this. I don't know how people do. I can't do it. And so like just my idea of what being successful looks like had to change.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, I've noticed that a big part of really being productive in life, and here's the thing, to its own end. But this is two thoughts crashing together at once. We'll explore maybe one of them at least, or both of them poorly. That's usually how I do it, which ties in very much with this insight. I've learned that my brain produces so many different ideas that I've never met one that I didn't think was the best ever, especially if I'm in a certain emotional state. And so then all of a sudden I'll spend a lot of time like for a couple of weeks working on some new idea. And then I'll stop or get burned out with it or forget about it for 3 months. And then I'll look back on it as this failed thing that I just couldn't do. And it's this big thing in my head. And it's like, well, no, actually it was a 2-week fixation that actually maybe I learned a few things. If I decided, oh, I'm going to do this with the podcast, and, I did it, learned a new skill in editing. Well, I learned it, I did learn it, and maybe that was it. And so can I embrace the doing of it in a way that I learned it and then moved on, and not have to be ashamed of, here's another thing that I didn't make it at. And it's like, or I get resentful, right? And say, that, oh, why didn't that work? I put so much into it. And then I'm like, no, I didn't. I didn't actually. I put 2 weeks of fixation and obsession on it. And then I thought a lot about it. But for some reason, just thinking about it didn't make it happen. Right. So like I've learned that I have to try to put new ideas on a list that's like the on hold list, and say, I'll come back to this if it's really something that I really want to do. I'm sure I'll think about it again, but it probably needs to be a few weeks. Before I could actually take the first step, because I just don't know that I want to do it after that.
I really like that.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. I really like the on hold list because it takes away the black and white thinking of I'm doing it or I'm not. Because there's a whole gray area. Nothing is like black and white like that. And I think like that too. I'm like, it's success or failure. And it's like, there's a whole world in between the two. And your definition of both can change. And I also like, we do look at that as a flaw, don't we? Like people who start things and don't finish them, we're like, oh, terrible. And it's like, maybe not. Like I've started a lot of things I never finished, and it was because I was interested in, then I wasn't. Like, why am I, like, I played guitar for a little bit and then I was like, I don't care about this anymore. And like, maybe one day I will again, but why am I going to force myself to play guitar if I don't like it? Like, and there's nothing wrong with being curious and wanting to explore. And like, I think we make people scared of failure or quitting when it's like, it's okay. Like right now I'm even going through a transition with COVID really inspired this, but like I'm doing less stand-up. So I'm like, okay, where can I focus? And I'm focusing on writing, and soon the podcast and recording again. And like that was scary because I was like, am I a quitter? Am I quitting? And it's like, well, it's impossible to do it right now. And like, no, there's a shift going on. And like, there's nothing really wrong with that, morally or otherwise, like, I think it's okay to pick up something, put it down, and just kind of, I think that's what people do. I think we're curious by nature and we want to try different things, and that's okay. Yeah. You don't have to be the champion of everything. You can just try stuff. And if you're not into it, and like, why force yourself to do something that you don't want to do if it's not necessary?
As I've gotten to know things like with my own ADHD type of symptoms and those of people that I've worked with and people in my family, and one of the things that I've come to think is that if you are neuroatypical, you have to remember that society was designed by people who are not ADHD by people who are not, or who are neurotypical,
Hmm.
for other people who are neurotypical, because that's just the assumption, right? Is you design a
Right.
thing, you design a school for people who think the way you think because you think that's the only way to think, right? Um,
Hmm.
and so when you look at that, it's exactly the way that you said is the way a lot of us engage with things is through bursts of dopamine and bursts of fixation. And what do we do with that? We say, oh, that's dysfunctional. What do you mean you used to obsessively collect stamps and you don't anymore? Oh, it's because you're ADHD, or oh, that's a cross addiction. Oh, you're addictive personality. Oh, you're bipolar. And it's like, well, not every interest that waxes and wanes is because of that. And as a matter of fact, if it is because of that, who cares? That's such a source of shame of people is saying like, over here's my box of stamps. Every 5 years, I bust it open and get obsessed with it for, a year. Over here's my guitar, and I haven't played it in a few years, but so what? I learned how to play it. And by the way, sometimes people with either mood regulation, emotional issues, or attention issues, or anxiety, or whatever, sometimes they tend to learn something very quickly, right? Or teach themselves more than someone else can, or something like that. And so, where's the shame in that? Say like, oh, I learned how to do that and learned it really well, and kind of quickly actually, and then I just haven't done it for a few years. That's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. And
Yeah,
well,
it's okay to be a person and just be interested in things sometimes and not other time, like I think there's a fixation on becoming the best. And it's like, who cares if you're the best? Like I was super like really into being the best at whatever I did for a long time. And it was like wasn't pleasant. Nothing was fun. State comedy became not fun. And it's comedy. Like because I was like, I need to be the best. And it's like, why? Who cares? Just have fun,
yeah,
you know?
comparison's always destructive. Like I
Hmm.
remember you mentioned this. I think it was the last time you were on about social media and how the comparison amplifies the self-destructive nature of those kinds of thoughts. So
Hmm.
that was a part of our discussion on gratitude. Do you do any kind of like beginning of the year kind of goals, resolutions, things like that? Is that a thing that you ever
Never,
think about? Just not at all.
never.
Yeah.
Because well, the marking of the new year is irrelevant to me. Like I don't know. I feel this feels preachy, but it's not. It's just something that's part of my life. Is in recovery, we learn that you can restart your whole life any moment of any day. You can restart your day, your life, whatever. And so I do it all the time. Like it'll be 1 p.m. and I'll have an awful day and I'll be like, you know what? Starting over right now, I'm going to be a little more positive. Like it's just something I do all the time in
Yeah.
micro doses, and also my clean date is much more important to me than the new year. My birthday has more significance than the new year. So it's not a practice I have. I also do not frown upon it, like whatever,
Yeah.
but it's
Right.
just not my cup of tea.
Everybody engages with it differently, just like everything else, which I guess, once again, going back to the core of the message is that's okay, figuring out how somebody does engage with it and doing it or not doing it and how they do it or don't do it is important to embrace, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
because that's part
And
of the real productiveness is figuring out how ourselves work.
right. And well, and the problem with New Year's resolutions is I think it's great to have them. I think it's a cool tradition, but I feel like it's been hijacked by like diet culture and advertising. You know what I mean? So many people, it's like I'm gonna lose weight on Atkins. And it's like that's the New Year's resolution, which I get because that's what's been shoved in your face. But like, I think like
Yeah. So it's a great opportunity for body shaming and for, right.
money, whatever, financial stuff, like which is fine to have all those like whatever, but it's like it shouldn't be so significant that you're like the new part of my entire life is going to be that I lose 20 pounds. It's just
And there is a weird, you're right. And I think that one of the damaging things with any expectation is when we limit our self approval for that. Once I hit this marker, then I'll feel acceptable, as you know.
which I've done a lot. Like I've done that. So there was a tattoo I wanted to get, this like a small example, but there was a tattoo I wanted to get. And I was like, well, once I get X, Y, and Z in comedy, I'll get it. There was like, I wanted to be in a relationship. And I was like, well, once I have this much money, I can be in a relationship. Like these were rules I had for myself. And now I threw them out the window. I'm like, I don't need to wait to start living my life,
Yeah. Well, speaking of living life, tell people Tell people where they can find you, first of all, because that's important.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Boone Comedy, Boone. Please go there and tell everyone to stop being so mean in the comments. And Instagram, same handle. And then I'm on TikTok at comedian Hannah Boone. And then Disordered is on Spotify and everywhere you can find podcasts. And then the Disordered Twitter handle is Disordered Pod, POD.
And what are your goals with the podcast as far as what do you want people to take away from it?
I want people to feel heard and seen, and I want them to laugh. I want to feel happy. And then I want people to feel like someone is acknowledging, like, yeah, I go through this too, or other people go through this too, and you're not alone. Like, as someone who is going to be a mental health worker in a couple months and a comedian, I really want to bring, like, I don't know. What helped me was being able to laugh at stuff I've been diagnosed with other people. And that's just, I hope people can find a sense of community in it.
Yeah. Great. What are you doing in mental health?
I'm going to be a recovery coach.
Cool.
So yeah, I'd like sort of, I shadow people with substance abuse issues and people with like legal trouble and help them through all that.
It's a great part of the field to work in. I've always enjoyed working with addiction, and with the court ordered thing is that, well, down the road, maybe we'll have a conversation about this for the podcast, but it's such a weird, dicey area. And so having good people, the mental health professional side of it is hopefully, in the best case scenario, is helping people to navigate and mitigate the trauma of actually being in the legal system as part of their mental health diagnosis, So that's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited.
Thanks so much for coming on today. I always ask people for, like, if they have a charitable organization they want to, but you've been on a couple times and you've done that. So I'm coming up with this follow-up question, which is there a thing that you think people, you would recommend that they could spend their time doing? It could be a hobby, could be a habit, could be a media recommendation of some kind, anything like that.
Like, just as far as feeling better, having good.
Well, it could be. I mean, it doesn't even have to be super productive, as we're saying today. It could just be, is there anything that's whether it's silly or fun or happy, or maybe it's deeply healing, or maybe
what is
all of those?
It's so simple that I just started doing at age 31, but going for a walk. Like, my boyfriend has dogs and I like to walk his dogs. And so with or without a dog, I love it with a dog, but without one, taking a 30-minute walk is so amazing. Like, it changes my whole day when I take a walk in the morning. And not even because I don't know if it's the exercise or if it's just the clarity. I don't know, but I recommend taking a walk.
Isn't that funny? Like, you see things too. I don't think about that as enough of, like, you drive through your neighborhood, but you don't, like, look at it very much.
Or I'm walking really fast on my way to somewhere. Yeah. But I mean, just take a walk with no time limit, nowhere like that you're going to, just like enjoy movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have a great rest of the whole 2022.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Court Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court Arts shows, visit courtemparts.com.